So, Daniel, welcome to Seabury's first interview in the series of Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Workplace.
It's an honour to be here.
It's great to have you out here from the UK and Singapore. Your career and what you're doing with your business absolutely fascinates me, and I think maybe to start that conversation, let's have a chat about how did you become interested in artificial intelligence in the first place?
I think ever since I was a boy I've been interested in AI because I've wanted to understand what it means to be human and what it means to be to have consciousness, and that is it means you have to understand complexity and emergent complexity, and the field of AI it explores all of those aspects of humanity.
Absolutely aligned with many of the things I've always been interested in, and you must have some really personal passions around artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. My main passion really is raising awareness about what AI is and what AI isn't, because there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and I want to try and get everybody aligned to a definition so that we can understand the opportunities for AI.
So you've come from being interested in AI to getting to a point where you actually have started your own company that not only delivers AI services, but actually uses AI to organise itself as a company. I'm fascinated about how all that works, Daniel. Can you explain more to it?
Yeah, that's right. So I've been, since doing my undergraduate, I've been doing artificial intelligence during my master's, my PhD, and I knew that I always wanted to be entrepreneurial, and I also knew that I wanted to start an organisation that was different to other organisations. So Satalia was actually born as an AI company 10 years ago, which was very early, and over the past 10 years we've kept ourselves alive through doing AI consultancy and building AI products, but also realizing that we can apply these technologies to organizing ourselves, and in particular I want to question what it means to have hierarchies in an organization, and how AI can break those barriers and make organizations more efficient and innovative.
So what does Satalia actually do, and how do you actually organise yourself?
So Satalia does four things actually. We do AI consultancy where we build solutions for large organizations that involved complex technologies like optimization and machine learning. We look for opportunities to build products from those innovations, and generate recurring revenues from those products. We have a proprietary platform that solves optimization problems better than anybody else, which is one element of the AI stack. And the fourth thing we do is we are trying to pioneer what it means to be an organization, and we're really trying to push the barriers of organizational psychology and applying AI to disrupting the workplace.
And what does it actually look like in reality? What would I see if I walked into Satalia?
As organizations are small, everybody knows what's going on. So if you've got 20 people in your organization, everybody understands what's going on, and they can make decisions because they understand, they have an overview. As you start to get bigger and bigger, what tends to happen is you put people in place that communicate with people underneath them, and those people then communicate and have a broader view of an organization. And these people we call managers, but really what they are communication conduits. They get the information from these people, they communicate and make decisions, and what we want to do is we want to remove the concept of a manager. So what we're seeing in industry is that the organizations that have many layers of management, as they get bigger and bigger, you get more layers of management. Organizations are realizing that those layers are inefficient, and they're stripping them out, and they're becoming flatter and flatter. But actually I don't think that's the right solution. What we're doing in Satalia is we're trying to be completely decentralized and distributed so that we don't have hierarchies.
When I talk on this topic, often I'm really interested in the idea of I'm really interested in the idea of the destruction of middle management, but also the emergence of what I call middle mentorship. That there is still a role for those lubricating pieces or the connectors in the organisation, but they're no longer managers. AI can do the managing of an organisation. It's the mentorship, the guiding, the direction, and even the spark, the cheerleading of the organisation is really important.
That's right.
Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 5 years ago, it was probably quite difficult to understand who were the connectors and who were the bridges within organisations. But what we're seeing now is organisations, and particularly Satalia, bringing all of our data into one place, our digital footprint that we're creating from email, from Slack, from our GitHub, from Jira, from all of these different tools. And we're bringing them all into one place so we can see how people are connected, and we can start to analyze our organizational network to identify those people. And also, quite interestingly, we can identify people who are the right decision makers. So if we need to hire somebody or procure some software or make a decision about a salary, rather than having a manager decide, we can identify who's the right person, who's actually the right consultation group for that person to talk to make an informed decision.
The obvious question that comes to my mind on that one is how? How do you, in principle it makes a lot of sense, but in reality, what's actually happening?
Well, let me give you an example. So Satalia has a number of principles that we adhere to with respect to building any of our processes. And those principles are radical transparency, complete freedom, and informed decision making. And what I mean by that is, let's say we're coming up with an expense policy. How do people do their expenses? Ordinarily in a traditional organization, you would have sign-off amounts. But if I want to adhere to these 3 rules, then it would be let anybody expense anything they want. You could go and expense a house, a car, it doesn't matter. So complete freedom. Radical transparency is making all of that information available. But informed decision making means give that person the right information so that they can understand what they should and shouldn't expense, and also give other people information to help them police those people. I guess another example of distributed decision making is a few months ago we allowed everybody to make public recommendations of their own salary. So you would make a public declaration of your own salary, and everybody else in the organisation, including some of our partners, would vote on whether that salary was appropriate or not. And my vote for you, so the weight of my vote for your salary, would be a function of 2 things. One is how closely I've worked with you over the past year, and we can see that from the data. So if I've worked with you very closely, and also how highly regarded I am as a strategic decision maker. So if I've worked with you closely and I'm a highly regarded strategic decision maker, then I'm in a better position to vote on your salary than somebody that isn't. And so that's one way that we're using organizational network analysis and AI to help with decision making.
This is a little bit mind-blowing. You're quite a small company, relatively. Can the ideas that you're applying at Satalia be expanded to much, much larger corporations?
It's a really interesting question. There's this concept called the Dunbar number. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's how many stable relationships we're meant to be able to maintain. And it's estimated that we can maintain about 150 stable relationships before it becomes difficult for us to manage. And we see companies like Gore-Tex, who are large organizations, but they cluster themselves in about 150 people. And if you look at any big organization, actually they're groups of, or teams of smaller groups of people. So my goal is to figure out how do we make it work for 70 people, which is what we have now, to scale to 150, and then look at mechanisms to scale even beyond that. I'm hopeful that that's possible because I'm seeing technology removing the need of a manager to be able to move information around to help people make those decisions.
And if I was working in a big corporation and I suddenly thought that this is a great idea, I love what Daniel's saying, come and help me tomorrow, what would that process look like in a big corporation to start to contemplate, will it work for us? Do you test it, pilot it? Can you recreate it in an imaginary virtual sense and then take it from there? What would it look like?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that this would work in a larger organisation. So actually, organisations want to work with Satalia not just because of our expertise, but also because of our organisational culture. And so we've worked with very big organisations, with small teams within organisations, but our culture has imprinted on theirs, and it started to then percolate through those organisations. So that's one way, is changing the attitude just by having organisations work with us. But what we would do ordinarily is go into an organisation, identify a group or a department, and try and apply our processes to that, and then see if we can move that to other parts of the organisation. It's almost like a Trojan horse, because as soon as people start to work in this way, they can't go back to the traditional hierarchies.
So recently I read this great book called What to Do When Machines Do Everything. And one of the interesting findings or recommendations of the book was an AI transformation is not the single big project. It's actually a series of small and segmented projects. So that sounds a lot like what you're recommending, which is don't try and do it all in one big program, but let's do it in incremental stages.
Yeah, no, that's right. And in each one of those stages, actually, the biggest barrier is the people change, is getting people on board and understanding how we can move what they're currently doing in their role to something else. And so yeah, we go into organisations and we build these AIs that change the nature of their work, and we have to do it in a very, very sensitive way. And Satalia is very fortunate in the way that we can be very choosy about who we work with, and we typically work with organisations who are thinking deeply about the impact that these technologies have on their organisation and on society as a whole. In fact, Satalia's purpose, whilst we're an AI company, our purpose is to enable everybody to do the work they love. Not just people within the company, but to enable everybody in the world to find their passion and to be able to pursue it. In a world where you don't have to work, how can we allow people to find out what they want to do and pursue it? And so I'm amassing an army of very smart and kind people to work out how do we build products and services and solutions to make that work in the real world.
So Daniel, if I was an employee at Satalia, or probably more to the point, a potential employee, would I find it just a little bit scary to be sitting there talking to you about your company and for you to be telling me, I'm going to make your salary transparent and we're going to make decisions in completely different ways? So how do people feel about working in this new model of AI? So how do people feel about working in this new model of company?
So I tend to hire people straight out of university where they're currently uncorrupted. They don't understand how the world works. So they join the organisation and they immediately embrace our transparency, our ways of working. But you're absolutely right to raise the point that people that join the organisation that have come from industry or had been used to traditional hierarchies, they do struggle. They kind of sit there waiting to be told what to do. And it takes them many, many months to be able to unpick those mindsets. But when people join the company, we don't have any rules in the sense that you can work anywhere you want, anytime you want. We don't have any KPIs. We don't have any. You're completely free to do whatever you want. If my company wanted tomorrow to create a Satalia pizza, they could. They might not have a job in 6 months' time. We're not particularly good at making pizza. But if they wanted to do that, if they thought that was the right thing to do and aligns with our North Star, then they can go and do that. So my hypothesis is if I can give smart, nice people the right information, they will make the best decisions. They'll make decisions that make themselves happy, and they'll make decisions that align with what the organisation is trying to do.
And in doing so, are they going to make decisions that make the organisation money, or at least enough money to survive and prosper?
Indeed. So we have sometimes we have very difficult clients, but what will happen is that where a project might look like it's in crisis, the people in the company will move towards us, will swarm towards those projects and solve them because they understand the value of doing that, as opposed to having a manager saying you have to do this or this or this. So it is genuinely self-organising in that way. I think for me that the pinnacle of a self-organising company is one whereby people self-select themselves to leave. So where people are not finding happiness in this organisational structure, maybe their life circumstances have changed, I want people to raise their hand and say, this isn't for me now, and I need to move on, and we as an organisation will help them move on. Now we're not quite there yet, but that's really my definition of successful self-organising companies, people that say, I need to move on.
And you mentioned before, there are some other things you'd like to share about Satalia and what you do.
Yeah. So I mentioned that Satalia's purpose is to enable everybody to do the work they love, and so we are thinking deeply about what does that world look like? How do we create a world where people from anywhere on the planet are able to do the things that they want to do? And so one of the things that we've developed over the past few years is a platform that allows people in the company to self-organize. They can allocate themselves to different projects, they can create new projects. And we're really good at building innovations, but we're not so good at pushing out product. You need a certain type of attitude, a certain type of impulse to push product. And so we have built some products that we don't have a huge impulse to take to market. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually try to open up all of our products, so make our products available for free to everybody, and build a platform that allows anybody in the world to contribute to those products and be rewarded for that contribution. So if you're a designer in India, or a finance person in Malaysia, or a software developer in America, how can we enable you to contribute to this open product and be rewarded for it? And if you extrapolate this out, perhaps there's a future world where all products are open. You don't need to have a centralized organization to have Uber or Facebook or Google. These platforms could be open and distributed. The question is, can you create a platform that allows for an ecosystem of people to contribute, be rewarded for that contribution, and drive those products forwards? So I see a future world whereby everybody in the world could contribute their time to anything that they wanted to. So they can work on anything they wanted to, be rewarded for that, and not have to belong to one particular organization. In some respects, it's an ultra gig economy where you could be working from anywhere in the world and be contributed in exactly the same way as anybody else. So in some respects, it equalizes pay. It removes the power from large organizations who are sitting on innovations and reaping the rewards of those innovations, because it makes those innovations free and open to everybody. But one of the big challenges in that future world of where you have an ultra gig economy is that it changes our nature of work. I could sit in my bedroom and I could generate a salary without having human interactions. And what we found in Satalia is that, I don't know if you've read the book by Dan Pink called Drive, but Dan Pink says that there are three things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is giving people the freedom to do what they want. Mastery is giving them the ability to become really good at what they want to do, and purpose is giving them something higher to align themselves with. In Satalia, we think there's a fourth one, which is around attachment. So we think that humans have a desire to attach. We form attachments as infants, we form attachment as adults, and if we create this ultra gig economy, I'd want to ensure that platform facilitated attachment and facilitated what it means to be human, to work in a community, and to have face time with people, and enjoy the things that you should enjoy as a human being.
So are we going to see a point in time where we have this emerging ultra gig economy, as you put it, Daniel, in competition with the traditional structural model of our traditional history of corporations? And what will that playing field look like?
Yeah, I don't know what the future looks like, and it's something that we're really thinking about a lot in Satalia. But you can imagine, let's say, there's a huge amount of wealth that's being accumulated in the likes of Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon. Let's take Amazon as an example. Amazon is sitting on probably an incredibly complex logistics software that manages their infrastructure, and it's reaping the rewards of that. And of course it should, because they've invested in that, but that logistics solution could be making a real positive impact to the world. And rather than having 50 people within Amazon contributing to that platform, could you open that platform up, that software up, and allow 400 people to contribute to it? And then everybody in the world can have access to that innovation. There's this concept called the Star Trek economy, which I don't particularly like the name, but it's a future world where everything is free that can be free, and that rather than people having to focus on materialistic things, they're focused on developing themselves and becoming better human beings, because they freed themselves up from having to buy stuff, and that's potentially a world that I'd like to try to create, and I think that it's a world that will help solve some of the impending problems that we're seeing at the moment with the accumulation of wealth and the accumulation of power in a small handful of corporations.
So Daniel, you've described a very radically different model, not only for companies but for society, but there are probably many people listening to this thinking, well, how does it actually pay for itself? It's all very well to do what you want to do, and people can have whatever they want, but somehow or other in commerce, and you're an entrepreneur, you're running your own business, you understand how to run a business, there must be a bottom line somewhere in all of this, and how is that realized?
So at the moment, the way that the organisation structures itself around KPIs or financial impulses is that all of our cash flows, all of our financials are open to everybody in the organization, and I regularly talk about them to everybody in the organization to say we're at risk of losing a client or at risk of the economy changing, and what that does is it gives people information to help them direct their time. So we make money by solving problems for companies, and my team enjoy doing those things. They like to build things and create things that have never been done before, and that's what drives them.
So you got the doers that are creating, but there must be the salespeople, the marketers that are trying to establish market prices and ensuring that you're getting enough revenue to create the kind of ecosystem that you are, to create the kind of ecosystem that you've built as your company.
So in Satalia, we don't have any sales or marketing people. I do a huge amount of public speaking, which sometimes generates some opportunities, but most of our work comes through word of mouth. I want to form deep relationships with a handful of large organizations and solve all of their problems, as opposed to solving one problem and then trying to productize that and send it to other people. So at the moment, the way that it works are people in the organization are genuinely self-directed. They are self-directed by having an understanding of our financials and also an understanding about what's important to them and what's important to the organization. As we get bigger and bigger, that might become more and more difficult. But right now, the hypothesis of give smart people the right information to make decisions and they'll make the right decisions is a hypothesis that's currently being tested and successful.
So how are you putting commercial value on solving a particular problem for a client in advance, so you can have a contract with that client?
You've mentioned the word value, which is a really complex word. Very often in organizations, when we talk about value, we talk about financial value. But actually, and that's very often the thing that directs decision making. In Satalia, we talk very, very little about financial value. As long as we're making enough money from a project to cover people's salaries and cover our overheads, we want to extract value in lots of different ways, whether it be altruistic purposes or whether it be educational purposes, whether this project's going to allow us to market the company or it's going to provide opportunities, or whether it's going to make the employees happy because it's a fun project. And actually, if you look at the word value and dissect it, there's probably 40 to 50 different perspectives, different parameters that you have to consider. And right now, I don't believe that an individual human can understand the value of all of those things. So I, in some respects, crowdsource that. Let me give you an example. There's a philosophical question, which is there's a burning building, and in the burning building there's a crying baby, and there's a suitcase with $100 million, and you can only save one. What do you save? And most people will say, well, I'll save the baby. But if you think, how many babies can you save with $100 million? And so I could put two people in a room and they will never agree on which is the best one to save, because they have different values, they value them. And so when it comes to opportunities, when it comes to projects, I want my employees to choose the projects that align with their own values.
So we've talked about the organisation. Now can we have a think about how will this different organisational structure, how will this different way of working with these people that are perhaps motivated in different ways, how will this different future state of working impact what people are actually doing day to day in their job, and perhaps even the places where they do their everyday job?
So I think that over the coming years, organisations are going to realise that if they want to stay innovative, it's not just going to be about technology, it's not just going to be about AI, but it's about how do we work with talent to architect those systems, to utilize those systems. And if you're an organization, you need to be really honest with yourself about how likely you are to attract that talent. And I've developed this kind of matrix, which on one dimension you have how sexy is your brand or your industry, and the other dimension is how complex or interesting are your problems. And if you're not sexy and you don't have interesting problems, then you're not going to attract talent. and you're going to need to learn how to work with external vendors, with startups to help drive your innovations. If you're sexy and you've got problems, then you're going to attract talent and they'll stick, and you'll be able to build those innovations internally. And if you're in the other two quadrants, then you'll attract talent, but they'll churn. And actually that can be even more dangerous than not attracting talent at all, because that talent can take away the knowledge and the intellectual property with them. So understanding where you are on this matrix and being really honest with yourself is super important, because that will dictate the strategy of engaging with talent to help you drive those innovations.
So presumably people will still come to work together in some way, physically or virtually. How will that look different from today? Will it be they're doing different nature of work, but the actual activities of work will look much the same, or are we going to see work looking differently than what we see today?
I think the way that the nature of work will change and will evolve over the coming decades. I think that in the short term we're going to see more and more remote working, using communication tools like VR and things like that to enable people to come together and collaborate more and more. But I think that if this future vision of the world where the ultra gig economy allows people to allocate their time to any project, then what I'd like to ensure is those people still have the opportunity to come together and have face-to-face time, because I believe that those are needs that humans have. In Satalia, we have an office only because people want to go to the office. They want to come together as a group and work with each other in face-to-face. And it's not like we have an office and we tell people they have to be there. It's a need of a human desire. So even in this future world of gig workers and kind of porous boundaries between the external world and the internal company, I think that we're still going to have a need for people to come together.
And that's your idea of attachment, but attachment's really important to people.
That's right. I think that, yeah, absolutely. And we see this actually in the design community, where you have lots and lots of freelance designers who are working with organizations, but what they do is they come together as a community, as a design community, and they share stories and they spend time together.
And I guess, look, not all work is digital either. So there are still companies that make physical products, and so the need to be able to touch, feel, debate as teams and as groups is probably going to still be important too.
Yeah, I heard a story recently about a university that created a small economy around a coffee machine. So what they did is that they gave everybody some Bitcoin that allowed them to buy coffee in this coffee machine. But if you contributed to maintaining that coffee machine, if you cleaned out the filter, if you filled up the milk, then you would get Bitcoin back. And the idea was that as the filter started to get more and more dirty, the value of solving that problem increased. So people would then solve that problem because they would get Bitcoin to allow them to buy coffee. And I imagine that type of ecosystem in physical worlds could also work in this distributed way.
So I just want to talk to you about what workplaces will look like, right? So that's a key part of the tail end of all of this is. So what will the workplace in the future look like? In an AI world, what will the future of workplace look like?
Well, I think the future of any place, whether it be a workplace, is going to look very different, in the sense that humans have traditionally intelligently operated in our world. We've intelligently engaged with our world, but over the coming years and decades, our world will start to intelligently interact with us. So if we're walking down a corridor and I'm walking past somebody, I might get told to go and speak to those people because they might be interesting for me. So I think that the world's going to start to prompt us to be more innovative and to collaborate and things like that. And we may even have a new type of furniture that's going to allow us to move around. There's a company called Valve, which is a games company, and they have desks with wheels on them so that they can move them around and have form different teams. So I think that's what will happen in the short term. In the future, where we have a world where anybody can work anywhere and they can contribute to anything, then I don't quite know what that currently looks like. Maybe what will happen is that there will be actually, I don't know what it looks like, to be honest. I've got no idea.
No, it's something I contemplate all of the time too. So
we're definitely seeing a movement, I think, towards kind of communities or communes of people living in these blocks with all of their needs serviced, and I could potentially imagine those communes actually operating as a commune, as a community, but those individuals working on these distributed products from anywhere in the world. So they're getting their human, social, community needs met, but at the same time they're able to generate an income from contributing to anything across the world.
And is there any problem from an IP perspective in this whole kind of model? The idea, we've had a traditional model where corporations hold their idea tight, they lock people in a room to solve the problem. Then we see young people in startup organisations who've grown up sharing video files, who share ideas very freely, because it's not so much the idea but how you enact on the idea that becomes important. How is that going to play out in this future model?
The concept of intellectual property, and actually the concept of property, is something that I'm very interested in. If I was to be completely honest, I actually don't think there should be such thing as property, which I know sounds crazy, but as I mentioned earlier, I think that what would be fantastic if there anything that could be free was made available for free, that allowed then people to use those innovations so that they can focus on doing more interesting things.
So in that model, we collectively benefit because we progress ideas and we create new products more effectively and more inexpensively, much faster. It's in this world of surplus economy.
That's right. All of those products are then available for anybody to utilize, and yeah, if you want to build those products out yourselves, then you can, but that IP has got to be then made available to the community, very much like an open source model, but it's an open company model where you're not just enabling the software development community to contribute, but anybody.
So even the idea of company in the future may be an irrelevant idea.
Yeah, there's a question that I often ask myself, which is, how do you compete with a company that doesn't need to make money? So if you look at Apple and Amazon, they have bottomless pockets of money, and the question is, as an organization, how do I compete, or how does anybody compete with that? And the answer is you can't. So how do you compete with a company that doesn't need to make money? You create a distributed company. You remove the concept of a company.
So Daniel, that's been an absolutely fascinating time we spent together today. Thank you so much for speaking today on our program.
Thank you.